Hey gang, in addition to playing games, I also like to do weeb things, and a fun hybrid of those is visual novels. There's one visual novel that I played not too long ago that I want to talk about called Baldr Sky. Baldr Sky is regarded by a lot of people to be one of the best visual novels out there. It takes about 150 hours to get through Baldr Sky. I've gotten through Baldr Sky. I have some pretty strong feelings on the game. So what we're going to do is we're going to break this up into a few sections. First one, just talking about the world of Baldr Sky. The second, a no spoilers review. And at which point, if that sounds like it's something that you like or that you may want to play in the future, you can turn off the video there. There will be a minor spoiler section where it's nothing major that I'm going to talk about, but just a warning in there. And finally, I'm going to get into some ruinous spoilers on the game because I fucking hate this game. And there's no way for me to explain how bad this game is without getting into the story. And with visual novels, it should be almost all about the story. Everything else is extra. And oh man, it has some problems. So let's kick this off with the description of the world of Baldr Sky. Baldr Sky is the first, and as of April 2024, the only Western entry into the Baldr Head franchise. Baldr Head is the first entry of many entries from a company called Giga. Giga went out of business in March of 2023. It was originally released in two parts. Baldr Sky Dive 1 came out in March of 2009, and Baldr Sky Dive 2 came out in November of the same year. In the Western release, these are combined into one entry, Baldr Sky. Again, considered one of the best visual novels ever made. You've got dark future, you've got mecha. If that's your thing, then it seems like a clear winner, right? Now I looked at it, said, hey, this is rated really well, and it has a theme song done by Kotoko, which is my absolute favorite artist out of Japan. But let's dive into the start of our story. Our story starts out with our main character, Kadokara Ko, who loses his memory and is on a quest to get it back with his companion, Rain. The story is based in a place called Suzushiro City. It is a sprawling, poverty-stricken location filled with slums, seedy underbelly, and at the center of that city is a place called the Ark. The Ark has Ko's aunt as the head of this organization. They are a super high-tech, AI-focused company that is building a simulated utopia to get away from the awful real life that everyone is dealing with. Some other factions that we see here in the story are an anti-AI faction called GOAT that take hating AI art to a whole new level. They loathe the Ark because they don't like the idea of people escaping reality and moving into some kind of simulated life. There's also another key group called Dominion. Dominion is a religious cult that believe that the real world is actually the simulation, and it's a simulation of people suffering. And their goal is to shed their mortal bodies and live on the net as something called wired ghosts, which is a avatar of yourself that you have on the internet, but you don't need that pesky body in the real world that you have to take care of. So with that out of the way, let's talk about one of the big driving points where people say this is a great game, and that is the combat. Combat is a real-time combat system where you use skills, you can upgrade those skills if you use them enough, you collect points, and you can unlock new skills with those points. The skills go from levels 1 to 3, and they can dramatically improve the quality of the attacks you're using. And man, if you're not playing in full screen, good luck seeing anything, because everything is minuscule. And I would point out to anyone that would say this is a great combat system, and I would point out that this was made in 2009. The PlayStation 3 was out in 2006. In 2008, Metal Gear Solid 4 was out. So you're comparing in an era where we have Metal Gear Solid 4, this pile of garbage. This was dated before it was even out. To say this is a good combat system is absurd. And while it has a lot of options on what to do, I found personally that if you just beam the shit out of everything, it's basically a winning combo for anything in the game. Now, that's not to say that it's great combat. It's interesting, but by the end, you are so done with this combat. And the fights get so needlessly difficult where just moving around is a Herculean effort. So you will enter combat and you will get swarmed and you just want to end it. You have spent over 100 hours in this game and you want to see the end of the story. And the combat by hour 60 gets to where you don't want to do it anymore. It's a visual novel. You're here for an interesting story. You're not here to grind out in some shitty combat system that was way dated for even its time. Now the story. No spoilers here. This whole game has no respect for your time. The writing is super slow. And remember how I said that our main character lost his memory in the beginning? Well, he keeps having flashbacks to the entire story where he's back in high school all over again, because you can't have a visual novel without going back to high school, right? That's illegal. So you're going to be going through this modern story that's actually somewhat interesting in some parts, and then you're going to go back to a D-tier high school story that who gives a shit about. You're here for mechs, you're here for cool stuff, and this is just storytelling to make you get interested in characters where you don't need to go back in time to do this. You could have written it in a way that did not throw you back to this time, but no, had to check a box, had to get that high school tag in there. If you wanted an interesting high school visual novel story, you could pick damn near any other visual novel and you would do better. So you're going to keep dealing with this shit in every playthrough for 150 hours. So that strikes your fancy, then yeah, you're going to love this. Now, once we get to the present and not dealing with any of the high school nonsense, the story moves at a glacial pace. The first playthrough is generally fine. The Dive 1, the first half of the Baldr Sky series, it's like a 40-hour visual novel. That is a pretty standard length for a visual novel. So you're going to get through the first story and you're going to say, okay, this is cool. Then you're going to go through the second playthrough. And most of it is the exact same thing, just from a slightly different angle to bloat the playtime. So you get to deal with all the same flashbacks, get to deal with all the same memory loss on playthrough after playthrough after playthrough. And they had a budget for 150 hours of voice lines, but somehow they didn't have the budget to actually change any of the sprites. So you're going back to high school, you're seeing them as kids, and they look the exact same as when they are in their mid-20s. Why? It's disappointing. Now, a lot of people really love this visual novel, and I think I can sum it up pretty well with sunk cost fallacy. You've got people that have spent a tremendous amount of time in this game, and they're quick to forget that they had to spend that much time to get to the end. The ending is I'd say way better than a lot of the other playthroughs. However, you've got to spend 150 hours to get there. For that time investment, that's not a good payout. If any of that seems like that might be your cup of tea, you can follow a no spoiler guide that I'll post in the description, and you can go off and play the game if you'd like. I forget it's $30 or $50. Get it on sale. Don't pay full price for anything. And you could cut the video right here if you'd like, because we're going to get into a few minor spoilers. So the minor spoiler section, we've got 7 routes in this game. In Dive 1, we have 3 heroines. We have Rain, Nanoha, and Chinatsu. And in Dive 2, we have 3 heroines, clocking it at 100 hours, Aki, Makoto, and Sora. Now you're thinking, didn't you say 7 routes? That's only 6 people. Well, that's because the 7th route is called Remembrance. And that route is the pure high school arc, where you have to go in between Aki's route and Makoto's arc, and you have to play through an entire playthrough of their high school experience, starting from their first day of school, all the way to Christmas. Christmas is an important day for Baldr Sky because that is where an event called Gray Christmas happens, where nanomachines are released and they melt all the biomatter around the lab that they are released. When this happens, a space laser called Gungnir burns the entirety of the lab and a lot of the neighboring city. This is basically the end of the high school arc. And we've got our main hero, Ko, and Rain going out as mercenaries in their mid-20s. And it is a consistent flashback to Ko talking about Sora, which is one of the heroines in the game, and about how he misses her and this, that, or the other. He talks about it a lot. And I would point out to anyone that is paying attention to the story is that they end up dating for all of 2 months. So this guy dates a girl for 2 months in high school at like 16, right? And then he's still talking about her in his mid-20s. Now, as adults, if someone was around us like that, we'd call that person a fucking loser, because that's fucking stupid. No one in their 20s is like, oh man, I met my soulmate back when I was 16. That person would be a fucking idiot. No one would want to hang out with that person. So despite them not actually interacting for much time in real life, Sora ends up being a really consistent theme for Ko. And it keeps bringing her up in all of the various routes. And it gets really old really fast. I'm going to leave it at that for a lot of the smaller spoilers. So at this point, I'm going to get into some pretty ruinous spoilers. So if you want to stay because you just want to hear kind of some highlights of the story, or you've already played it and want to hear my opinion, by all means. But if you've heard any of this and you're still like, oh no, I may want to do this in the future, then this is your last chance, final stop. But otherwise, you're free to stay with me and have me rant about how much this game is a piece of shit. So let's go. So breaking down Dive 1, the first 3 girls. So first entry, for the first ending, you've got Rain, and super average story. Ko loses his memories, you got a good ending, and it's fine. Well, I don't remember one of the endings. And you got another ending where basically Ko forgets who Rain is, and he thinks she's Sora, that girl that he dated for 2 months. And for whatever fucking reason, Rain's like, oh yeah, this is fine. I'm here to take care of him. And it's fucking stupid. It's a bullshit story. That's a bullshit ending. Why would anyone be like, oh yeah, I'm in my mid-20s and I've got this guy that I like, and he thinks that I'm his old 16-year-old girlfriend and talks to me like I'm her all the time. And yeah, that's fine with me. That's a-okay. It's just stupid. It's a bad ending. Again, it breaks the whole idea of they're writing a good story. It's stupid. It's fucking stupid. And moving away from Rain, your next ending is going to be Nanoha. Ko still doesn't remember anything. And the big thing with this arc is Nanoha gets a nanomachine colony placed inside of her. I don't even fucking remember why or how it happened, but whatever. Your good ending, it gets removed, everyone's happy, yay, it's super boring, nobody gives a shit. These other endings, though, are actually pretty interesting. The normal ending is they contain the nanomachines. They go haywire, but they're in a container. And Nanoha lives in a simulation. And Ko visits her in this simulation. But outside of the simulation, the world's at war. You've got Dominion that's like gone haywire, and they're growing as a cult, and they're killing a bunch of people. And he's out there fighting, and he's like, what if I don't come back? She'll just be stuck in the simulation forever. That's a pretty generally cool idea. The bad ending, which I think is one of the best endings in the game, the nanomachines go haywire, they don't contain it, and it melts her and the main character, and they both become like the same entity living in these nanomachines. And the nanomachines end up going underground for safety because they know that that space satellite that shoots the fiery lasers down is trying to track them. So they will, when it's overcast, come up to the surface and separate into two different beings. And it's a really cool idea. I really enjoyed that. That was genuinely pretty awesome. Now, your third girl is Chinatsu. Jesus fucking Christ, this whole arc is just garbage. Again, starts out, Ko doesn't remember anything because that's just the story of Baldr Sky. It's like, I don't remember any of this. Fucking, it got old after it was first made popular back in Final Fantasy VII in 1997. Here we are over a decade later, and this is being done to fucking death. So Chinatsu, she loses her body during Great Christmas, and she's a cyborg, and she joins the anti-AI faction. They are clearly the bad guys in every story that they tell. And Ko's like, oh yeah, I like Chinatsu, I liked her back in high school. And then she's like, you want to join us? And he's like, yeah, sounds good. Everyone around him, his partner, his dad, his aunt, all of the people that are ancillary to them, are all like, yeah, those are bad people, you shouldn't join them. And he's still like, but I want that cyborg pussy, so I guess I'm gonna join the bad guys. And it turns out in the end, they were bad the whole time. And it's shitty writing. It's such shitty writing. You get to the later part of her arc, and they have this machine called Tranquilizer. And it puts a pilot inside, and it basically merges the pilot with the mech, and they're fighting inside cyberspace. And he's like, I don't know where Chinatsu went. And they're like, don't worry about it, it's fine. And very immediately you are like, oh, but I can tell Chinatsu is the pilot of the thing because like she's got the voice coming out of the machine. And he's just like, well, I don't know who it is. Oh well. It's just fucking dumb. Again, 3 endings, the bad and normal ending are pretty forgettable, but the good ending is the real what the fuck moment in this whole story. So the good ending, where everyone's happy, is we get to the end and Chinatsu's decided to get a clone of her body instead of being a cyborg anymore because she wants to actually feel things again. But when her body is being cloned, she gets out early because she doesn't want to live in like the internet. She loses her body or something. I don't fucking remember. Who cares? All that matters is what happens next. So she gets out of the clone vat early. So she is biologically like 10. And the good ending is her as her 10-year-old self and our main character in his mid-20s are going town to town because people keep reporting them for reporting him rather for inappropriate contact with a minor. What the fuck kind of a good ending is this? It starts out with a police officer coming up and saying, hey, we've heard some reports. And they're like, oh, no, it's okay. She's a clone. What the fuck? Who? There's... I don't know how anyone thought this was a good thing. This is bad. This was the ending of the first game. This was the payoff for 40 hours that people led up to. This weird child predator ending. And fuck, dude. I'd like to say this is the only entrance, but this is just the start. We'll get to the rest later. Let's move on to Dive 2. This is the 100-hour piece of shit arc. So you've got Aki. Aki is basically Ko's stepsister. So yeah, this is the stepsis arc. Again, Ko doesn't remember fuck all. It's getting really fucking old. The good ending is just like the whole story is just mediocre. Good ending is, oh, like we're gonna go live on a beach house and be happily ever after, yay. The other 2 endings, I don't even fucking remember. Like they were so forgettable. Nothing special happens in this entire playthrough. There's no point where I'm like, that's an important bit. That's an important bit. It's all just feels like filler to say that, oh, this person got an ending. But after that, you can't go through any of the other endings for the girls because you have to go through that fucking high school arc. You can, like, there's a secret to this. You can go in and you can turn off all the voices and just skip through the entire story. You'll have one choice in this whole time where you go through this remembrance arc. And it's a worthless choice. It doesn't do anything to change the story. They'll make you go through combat in where it's like, oh, well, you're in high school and this is where you did your, high school era mech fights, and you can lose those and it's fine. Just skip it. There's everything in here, not everything. There's like 75% is stuff that you've already seen, but it doesn't recognize that you have played through it, so you can't just skip through what you've already read. So if you just let this game play or you go through it, you're just repeating content. It's a huge waste of time. And the little bits that they do add aren't worth it because the important parts are brought into the actual character routes. This is just straight up filler. This was one of the worst fucking things I've seen in any visual novel ever. So let's move out of the high school arc and let's go into Makoto. And in this arc, the unthinkable happens. Ko remembers everything. Now, this is legitimately a massive step up in the story quality here. If you look on VNDB, you see a marked difference between Dive 1 and Dive 2 in terms of rating. And I would say this is a big reason for it. Makoto's arc, generally pretty interesting because it dives into the story of Dominion and that particular cult's beliefs. And there's some parts in there where I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. Like, she's very strong believer in like, oh no, we're in a simulation. And everyone's like, no, we're not in a simulation. Yeah, it was a huge breath of fresh air to go through it. The good ending is just your generic happy ending. Like, it's really not a great payout. The other two endings, I don't even remember them. They're pretty forgettable. Now, our final arc, our final heroine, Sora, the person that was melted in the beginning. This is a really unique start here because here, when the game starts, in every other playthrough, it starts from the same point and you have your partner with you, Rain. In this start, Ko wakes up and he's alone and he's trying to find people. Everywhere he goes is empty. And he slowly finds the cast of main characters. I say it was interesting, but I wouldn't particularly say it was good. It doesn't make a lot of sense as time goes on to be like, oh, why is it that in a city that's supposedly filled to the brim of people that Ko is only finding people that he knows? So if you suspend your disbelief there, it's fine. It's a different story, and you go through and you find people that are in the various other routes like Rain, and you get Nanoha and Shinatsu, and eventually you find Sora and you're like, oh my god, Sora, you got melted years ago. And then Sora's like, no, you got melted years ago. And it turns out, big spoiler here, that it was a simulation the whole time. Everyone's been in a simulation. Every ending that you've gone through is a simulation. They also discover that outside of the simulation, everyone on Earth is dead. Oh no. And in these simulations, there is an A and a B branch. In the A branch, Ko lived in Grey Christmas, and he was like the one that saw Sora get melted. And in the B branch, it's the reverse. And the whole reason that they do this is to be like, oh, look, in all these simulations, we were never meant to be together. And it's supposed to be really romantic and like, oh, wow, this is so beautiful. But I would point out again that they were dating for 2 months. You are trying to make this fated encounter thing go where they really didn't know each other. No one is like, oh man, I had this really amazing relationship back in high school, because high school relationships are really vapid and they're very temporary. No one is like, man, that was my chance in life and I missed out on it when I was 16. anyone that says that in their 20s, there's something wrong with that person. They're going to wind up on a list, probably. Credit where credit is due. They reveal the main bad guy of the whole story. It is a person that they have referenced throughout every arc, Dr. Neunzine. It's always made to seem like this is a person, but they actually describe him at one point, and he's a really cool concept for a bad guy. Dr. Neunzine's actually just a series of brains that are all kind of plugged in together. He likes to think like a machine. And while they're figuring out how to get out of this simulation, they're like, oh man, this guy is really bad. We got to defeat him. And then Sora's like, oh yeah, he's the guy that killed your mom. You're 150 hours in. And you've got this really important detail that even though you've had his dad around to share this detail the whole time, he never has. And he's just like, oh, well, now that we have the bad guy revealed, I'm going to give you the plot reason why you have to defeat him. And it's just bad. If you had not put that part in, it would have been like, okay, cool. Like, it's just a bad guy. Let's go defeat the bad guy. But the fact that they tried to double up and be like, oh no, like you actually have a personal vendetta against this series of brains because he killed your mom. It's just like, why? Who fucking cares? No one gives a shit about his mom. No one's ever met his mom. His mom doesn't even have any voice lines. Fuck her. Who cares? No one cares. He's in his 20s. He's supposed to be a mercenary. He's a fucking loser. Jesus. Ugh. So, and you've got Sora and Co. They're like, oh no, I've really missed you. I've loved you the whole time. And again, they're like in their mid-20s in this simulation, and they dated each other for 2 fucking months. And they're both fucking losers. So I guess in a way they're made for each other. But when you win this route, by winning, you fix all of the other simulation branches, which means all those endings that had impact and permanence, it just undoes them. It ruins it, as far as I'm concerned, because you're making this Deus Ex Machina bullshit where you're going in and you're like, oh, well, now there's no consequences to any of these actions. Any of these bad endings where things happened? Just kidding, because you won the game. Good job. Everything's happy. Everyone's yay. But there's an additional part to this where they fix the routes for the bad routes endings. They show you what happens after the good routes. And they decide, oh, you know what would be a really, really lovely ending is like, what if we have some of the heroines and they're like, oh, you're going to be a dad soon, Co. So I'm going to put up a picture of all 5 of the heroines. And I want you to pick which of the heroines the writers thought should have stories where they're suddenly with child.
So we were thinking with the good ending follow-up, we could have some of the heroines tell the main character that they're pregnant. What do you think? Oh, yeah, I like that. I really like kids. So we read the script you sent us, and yeah, I really, really like kids. Well, so do we, so we're going to send it off to the voice actors immediately. Good job.
Yeah. In a love story straight out of Epstein Island, we've got all 3 of the children, or characters that look like children, suddenly with child. What the fuck? My respect for the writing team, it fluctuated a lot during this whole series. But by the end of here, it went down to nothing. This is fucking terrible. I don't understand how anyone thought this was a good idea, because you've got 150 hours of shit in here, and someone was like, oh yeah, let's diddle some kids. Yay. Everyone's going to love this. They're going to be so happy. What the fuck? And so the end of this whole thing, the whole feel good ending is they're eventually able to control machines in the real world to bring back mankind and introduce them to the wild again. And they leave the simulation and they have their real bodies, and Ko and Sora are like, oh yay, we get to live happily ever after. And on a surface level, it's really, really lovely, right? Oh oh, that's great. They left the simulation and they're together now. There's a problem if you've caught it already. And if you haven't, it's that all of those simulations are actively running at the same time, which means there are not just one entry of Ko and Sora and all of their friends. There are n number of side characters, and there are n divided by 2 Soras and n divided by 2 Kos. So do they all get brought into meat space? Do they all get a clone? Do those branches get pruned like fucking Loki style, where they just were like, you're not part of the sacred timeline, go eat shit? Did they just let those branches die out? Like, none of this is explained. It's just assumed that, oh yeah, well, you were looking at these 2 individuals, so this is what actually happens. It's not explained well. It's not written well. You make a lot of leaps of logic here, but as soon as you start thinking, and this whole story is meant to be thought-provoking. It's meant to have you say, oh, well, what is happening here? What is real life? What's a simulation? If you keep using your brain, this ending doesn't make a lot of sense. It's not very good. If it had been a simulation where it was starting over again each time, this would have worked just fine. But they didn't do that. They did this weird branch shit where they're like, oh, we're always, Ko and Sora are always alive in their own respective branches, but they're never together. How terrible. And also, like, does that, like, if we bring everyone into real space, do we get a bunch of like child predator Kos like out there where he's just like default on a list? Like, what's the plan with that? Because none of the other like people are gonna want to live around that guy. So, oh man, the great parts of Baldr Sky, they'll stick with you. And you'll be like, oh, this is interesting. I still think back to some parts of Baldr Sky, but a lot of the things I think back to are really negative. I didn't like a lot of this because it wants you to use your brain, and if you use your brain, there's a lot of holes, and it wastes so much of your time. The time investment for Baldr Sky is just not worth it. And you've got your average visual novel at 40 hours long. You could finish 3 S-tier novels in the time for a single Baldr Sky playthrough. ROI, return on investment, it's not there. If you want an S-tier mecha game, play Muv-Luv. I'll make a video on that sometime in the future because that is the best visual novel I've ever played. Maybe skip the first entry to the series. It's not particularly great. Well, it's a trilogy, not a series, whatever. But we'd give it a scale from 1 to 10. I'd give this game a solid 4. It's sunk cost fallacy for all the reviews you see. Everyone that's gone through this, you cannot convince me that people played 150 hours of this game and were like, yes, this was actually super great. You've got people that are coping. It's pure cope. Now, would I play other entries of the Baldr Head series? Well, probably I would. I mean, I spent like 150 hours in this game, right? Like the other games are like, what, 40 hours a title? And like the music's done by Kotoko. Like, I love her. She's great. That's all I got to say on Baldr Sky. I could have gone on more, but I wanted to keep it relatively condensed, which I think I failed to do. But hey, it is what it is. I'll see you guys in another video. Talk about other visual novels or regular games or games industry stuff. We'll see what the future holds. And thanks again. Bye.